Well, good evening and welcome to France 24's AFCON roundup. We will be going over all of the action from the very first game of the 2025 African Cup of Nations in Morocco. To discuss that with me are my football experts, Thando, Sibiya and Andreas, Evagora. Good evening to you both.
Good evening again.
Well, before we talk about it amongst ourselves in the studio, let's first head to our eyes and ears on the ground. France 24's own Selina Sykes. Selina, you are joining us from Rabat in Morocco, where that first game took place, and it wasn't exactly the walkover we expected. Still a win, though, for Morocco. What do you make of this opening game?
That's right, Emily. It was a pretty frustrating first half, wasn't it, for the Atlas Lions, who obviously came into this tournament as the big favourites. And in that first half, well, they dominated in possession. Definitely most of the first half taking place in Comoros' half. But the Walid Regragui's side are struggling really to get past the Comoros back line. A lot of men behind the ball for the underdogs. Comoros maybe playing at Morocco's own game because back at the World Cup in 2022, it was the Atlas Lions who parked the bus against bigger opponents. And that's certainly what Comoros did here in the first half. Soufiane Brahimi had a penalty saved 11 minutes in. The entire stadium was getting ready to get the party started, but it was an excellent save from Yannick Pandor. What a moment for the Comoros keeper. An excellent save to keep the Atlas Lions at bay there. Most of the possession, as I said, was in the Comoros half in those first 45 minutes. Moroccans looking increasingly frustrated, and that was also seen throughout the stadium with lots of whistles and jeers as the Moroccans struggled to find a way through. Goalless at the end of those first 45 minutes. The Comoros doing very well to keep Morocco at bay. Morocco having 7 out of 8 of the attempts in the first half, but only 1 on target, as did Comoros, also getting 1 on target in the first half. The crowd clearly frustrated, but that was soon eased, wasn't it, in the second half when Brahim Diaz scored in the 55th minute. As Comoros looks increasingly stretched, there was a massive gap in the box, which Real Madrid, a winger, took full advantage of. A great cutback from Nusser Mazouari for an assist for the Man United player for that first goal. There has to be said that then Comoros came very close to levelling. A great save from the Moroccan keeper Bono to keep them at bay on the counter. Rafiki Said getting an effort in from close range, but Bono, the Moroccan goalkeeper, showing really just why he has been chosen this year as the continent's best goalkeeper, with a great save from him. Then another excellent double save from the keeper, the Comoros keeper Pandor, double save to keep the Moroccans at bay, but they did double their lead and get that second goal. And what a goal it was! Ayoub El Kabi with that overhead kick, sending the celebration, the stadium into absolutely wild celebrations with that second goal there. So after a frustrating first half, obviously the floodgates slightly opening in the second one for Morocco. A 2-0 win for them. That's a job done for the opener with those 3 points in the bag. They'll have a slightly tougher text next up against Mali for their second game.
Well, Selina, it was our first look at Morocco's football form, but it was also our first look at Morocco's hosting form. What was the experience like for you on the ground?
Well, listen, Emily, it was very smooth everywhere we've been going today. Obviously, a remarkable stadium here, the Prince Abdoulaye Abdullah Stadium. Really one to admire. You can't see it behind me, unfortunately, because the rain is still going strong here in Morocco, but a very impressive high-tech stadium to admire here. Obviously, this one just having been inaugurated shortly before this AFCON tournament. Obviously, we mentioned it earlier, Morocco that's put a lot of investment into this competition for this AFCON, but also already looking ahead to the 2030 World Cup. So everything running smoothly so far. That's what all the fans have been saying as well, that obviously there's been a lot of anticipation with all this money that's been put behind the infrastructure here, and all going well as things stand. And obviously we'll be taking a look at some of the other stadiums throughout the competition.
Well, I'm glad you were able to have fun despite the rain there, Selina. Thank you very much. Selina will be following the entirety of the competition for us in Morocco. Now, let me come back to you both here in studio. We had a bit of, we wanted to place our bets before the game. Thando and I said 3-1, but you, Andreas, said 2-0. You got it right.
I got lucky today, yeah. Of course, I'm not a betting man, so I didn't put any money on it. I think it was a perfect night for Morocco. There was one problem, which is Romain Sykes, their central defender, who was injured. Let's hope that's nothing too serious. But I think it's good when hosts start with a tough game rather than an easy one. And as Selina's saying, that was, a tough game. It was 0-0 at half-time with this wonderful save from Yannick Pandor. He was dominating his penalty area. It was Pandor's box, you could say. And then in the second half, this is the beauty of AFCON, because you have Pandor, who's not particularly well known, plays in the lower reaches of the second division in Belgium, up against a superstar like Brahim Diaz of Real Madrid. Diaz made it 1-0, and then that brilliant goal we were talking about to make it 2-0. And I think it was a good night for Morocco. It was really heavy rain throughout the night, which is not particularly unusual, but it's also a test for the home team. But El Kabi's overhead kick was fantastic, and he's been in really good form for Olympiacos in Greece so far this season. I know Moroccan fans thought he was going to start as centre forward today, so maybe they'll be thinking, for the next game, he's certainly the favourite to start, and he's passed 30 goals for his country, so a great night for him as well, and I think a really good night for Morocco.
Well, I'm really glad you were able to get that joke in. It's probably my favourite joke, and it's only day one. Thando, what do you make of that quite frustrating, quite slow start in the end for Morocco? Do you think they were expecting a slightly different opponent this evening?
I think when it's an opening match, you have very low and high expectations. But I think for Morocco, in the way that they played in the first half, the ball, they had possession for the most of the first half, but they were just struggling to capitalize. And yes, as Selina mentioned, they did park the bus, their opponents. And so I think that made it a little bit difficult for them. We also remarked during the game was that there wasn't a lot of chances coming through for the wings. And so they were neutralized in the center, which is where then when the game opened up, most of the goals were coming from in the second half. We saw even El Kabi's overhead goal and even his second attempt towards the end of the game. Most of the opportunities were coming from the center in some kind of dual pairing in the center. And so in the first half, we were not able to see that because you had 9 defenders all squashed up in the middle of defense, neutralizing the Moroccan side and the Moroccan attack. So maybe at halftime, that was some kind of feedback that Coach Walid gave to the feedback, or even some analysts or anyone from the outside. We even saw Hakimi from the sidelines mentioning the way he was reading the games. So if you have that kind of experience, those are the kinds of observations that you can have at halftime, and then the necessary changes are made, because really the game opened up, it was more fluid, there was a lot more action. I think it even helped open up for Comoros in their advantage, where they could find themselves attacking a little bit more than they were in the first half. And so a couple of missed chances from the side of Comoros, which then shows that in the rest of the competition, they are a team to be looked out for. In the previous edition of the African Cup of Nations, which was in 2021, they were knocked out in the round. They finished in the round of 16. So this is a team that has some bandwidth and can make it past group stages. So I don't think it's over for them yet. And I think they're definitely a side to look out for. And because we were looking at the possible permutations, if you must, would be that the winners of the group would be playing up against the third place. If Comoros comes up in third place, they might see themselves going through to the round of 16, and then they might even carry on a little bit further in the tournament. So I think they should keep their chins up. The save from Pandor was actually something that could reinforce the confidence in showing that they have the defensive capabilities, and that they do also have just a little bit more confidence in managing the tight spaces and situational intelligence as well. So if they can keep it up in that way, I think they can be quite a challenging team. But congratulations to Morocco for a good opening game.
A great opening game, but as Tana was just saying, Comoros showing quite a lot of potential there. They had a few attempts on goal, getting into the box, maybe looking a bit nervous in when it came to finishing. What's your take on that first appearance from Comoros?
I agree. Comoros, remember, they could get through just with one win if they're one of the best third place teams. Well, look, we should point out Comoros were not too far from qualifying for the World Cup. Going into the last round of World Cup games, the last two, they would have actually gone through if they'd have won their last two. Unfortunately, they lost against Ghana and they just missed out. It is a side, all but one of their players is born in France and have gone through the French youth academies in various different clubs. So, they're well coached, they're good footballers, perhaps not just quite making it at the top level. So I think they can get plenty out of that match, indeed, and they'll be looking forward to the next 2 games. If they can get 1 win, we could still see them in the round of 16.
Any players of the match that stood out for you both this evening, Thando?
Thando stood out for me, obviously as a goalkeeper. We spoke about it even in the opener, that when you have that last line of defence that's quite solid, it reinforces the confidence of defence. And you need confidence in the defensive structures so that you can keep the team coming through. And because a lot of the attacking and blocking of goals, we have like your Morocco, your Senegal, the Malis, your possibly South Africa, and so many other sides who have very strong attacks. So if you have a very confident defence and last line of defence that can then reinforce that confidence, then that can be a good advantage for the side. So I think Pandor is quite crucial in the game. He's 24 years old. He handled the ankle knock niggle early in the game quite well. He did have that confidence and reassuring his defensive structures. I did see towards the end of the game the coach did make 4 changes in the defense, and so we do see that they also have a little bit of depth in bringing in a little bit of fresher feet. So yeah, that's quite, for me, Pandor is one to look out for, but there's quite a few in the defensive structures that I think we can definitely look out for as well.
Andreas, player of the match?
I think Brahim Diaz, we talked obviously a lot about Hakimi as a key man, but I think Brahim Diaz might be the star player from this World Cup because, Morocco are going to be looking down to break down a lot of these tough defences, and he's a fantastic player, Diaz, and he scored tonight. So I think Brahim Diaz was excellent. And Amrabat in the middle, he's not going to make many headlines, but he just keeps things ticking in the middle of the park, the Morocco number 4. So he had a really good game. But yeah, I think Diaz was probably the main man, as well as El Kabi for that brilliant goal.
And we saw the first use of VAR, of course, in the first half, slowed things down quite a bit. What were your thoughts on how that was managed?
Yeah, it was maybe a controversial penalty. We're used to VAR now, and I think we just all hope the decisions are made quite quickly, because when decisions take a long time to make, it's frustrating for the players and for the fans. There weren't too many today. I think most football fans hope there's not too many VAR decisions. There was 1 or 2. There was one in the first half where we thought there was a penalty for Morocco that finally wasn't given. It was a very difficult game to referee that, partly because of the weather conditions, and it was quite a physical game as well. So I think on the refereeing side, it went, pretty well.
Yeah. What about you, Thando?
Yeah, I think the same. In the previous AFCON edition in 2023, that the officiating did come up a few times with people challenging the officiating. I think this is quite a good start. It was handled quite well and professionally. So kudos to Jean-Jacques Ndala from Congo. I don't want to be in his feet, especially officiating a game of the host nation being the opening game. That decision, the second one, it was after the penalty. I think we were all a little bit uncertain about what was happening because you had a defender coming in. We weren't sure if it was a handball. We weren't sure if it was a tackle. But I think just ultimately that's probably why it was just a non-penalty, because it was a very hard decision to make. And also for the fluidity of the game, they had to carry on and keep it going. So I think when it comes to that kind of decision making, it would be very nice to have in the studio like a referee to get their perspective, to just give us a little bit more of a detailed explanation of what happens in that decision making and how do they then manage that so that it doesn't go on for so long and that the game can continue. But I think it was quite all right, especially in the second half. I think it was much better with a little less drama.
Okay, well, that was our first game of this AFCON. Let's now turn our attention to tomorrow's fixtures. In Group A, we have Mali against Zambia. And then Group B springs into action with South Africa versus Angola, and later Egypt versus Zimbabwe. Now, you can look at those fixtures there on your screens. Let's start with that Group A match there. The Eagles of Mali against the Zambia Copper Bullets. What will that look like, in your opinion, Andreas?
Mali, well, they're here for the 10th consecutive AFCON. They're really regulars. They've got experience. They really struggle to get out of the quarterfinal phase. I wonder if this will be the year they finally do it. They've got one of my favourite players in Ligue 1, Doumbia. Kamori Doumbia is a fantastic attacking midfield player. I hope he plays well. I think they'll be too strong for Zambia tomorrow. Mali are a solid side. Sinioko is a good forward for them as well. So I think they'll be too strong. I think they'll pick up the 3 points tomorrow.
Are you also betting rather than rooting on Mali? You might be rooting for Zambia, for all I know.
As a COSAFA region kind of observer, I would like to go for Zambia, but I don't think Chipolopolo would be able to take it through. But we'll see tomorrow. I don't want to say anything final because the AFCON is full of surprises. But Mali, in attacking, they're very good with the short passes in the box, and I think that can be very dangerous for the Zambian defense. They also defeated South Africa in the last edition of the African Cup of Nations 2-0, and I think those are the kinds of things where, if you observe, for a game at this early stages of the tournament, I think they can make an upset against Zambia.
What will they be thinking looking at Morocco's game this evening? Their 3 points. Which of those two, between Mali and Zambia, do you think has the best chance of an upset against the hosts?
Oh, I think Mali. I think Mali on their day, they can beat anyone on the African continent. They were really disappointed not to get to the World Cup. They thought they had a chance. It didn't go for them. Their away form wasn't great, and they had some internal problems. But they've got the players, and I definitely think of the two, Mali can challenge Morocco. And they're two teams who know each other very well. A large representation from here in France, from Ligue 1. So they could be really close. I wouldn't be surprised if Mali get a draw out of Morocco.
You agree with
I do, really close and similar. And in my notes that I had made from the AFCON last time, I had noted that quite like Morocco, then they have quite the short passes, and defensively they've organised quite well. So that will be an interesting matchup. But yeah, I think they can hold a draw or perhaps even a defeat against Morocco. Yeah.
And that will give us, the first look at that Group A once we get those results in. Then, of course, it will be treated to Group B. This one is for you, Thando. First fixture, South Africa versus Angola. How do you rate Bafana's chances tomorrow?
Oh, I think they have a lot. They can do it. I don't think it's going to be easy, though. Again, it's a COSAFA matchup. And so in the COSAFA tournament, we do see that it can be a little bit difficult for either Bafana or Amajito, whoever's playing in that specific region. I'm referring to the region and not the actual championship. But I do think Hugo Broos has a lot coming in for him. And the sweet story that I was telling about why I think Bafana are the side to look out for, it continues. Tomorrow he'll be playing his 50th match, which then becomes the longest record after Clive Barker, the late Clive Barker, who was the coach at the time in 1996, when South Africa or Bafana won the African Cup of Nations. So that continuity, hopefully the football gods are in South Africa's favour for that one. But in terms of who to be looking out for, I do think Mohaou Nkota is one to look out for. He plays for formerly played for Orlando Pirates, and now he's at Al Ettifaq in Saudi Arabia. He's been performing really well. Hugo Broos wasn't very happy with that move to Saudi Arabia. He would rather have his players, or the players that he selects, staying either in South African League or moving to a little bit more reputable or more challenging leagues, especially for younger players. Nkota is 21 or 23 years old. So I do think he's one to look out for. Defensively, I think Aubrey Modiba can do it because he holds the defense. He's got experience. He ushers defense, but he also can make those runs going up. So having a player like that with a little bit of creativity and also experience to hold, and he's pairing with Mudau, I think that can be a really good combination that might make it difficult. Mabululu in the previous African Cup of Nations for Angola was a little bit of a dangerous one that they should be looking out for. So again, that South African defense will have a little bit more work to do. And if there's some players in the midfield who can fall back to support, then great. But if there's no need, then we can just keep the formation as it is. Generally, Hugo Broos tends to go for a classical 4-4-2. So I think that can work quite well for Bafana. And I think they have what it takes to do a very good job, not just tomorrow, but in the tournament altogether.
And what about Angola? How are they looking? Do you think they can put up a fierce opposition for their game tomorrow?
Yeah, I think they've definitely got a chance. I mean, Angola have got to they struggled to get past the quarterfinals in the last 16 of these Africa Cup of Nations. It's a country where there's certainly no shortage of funding in that country. Angola has put a lot of money into its football as well. I think they'll struggle to get out of the group stage, though.
Okay, well, let's have a look finally at the Pharaohs versus the Warriors. Egypt against Zimbabwe. 7-time AFCON champs against Zimbabwe, who've never been past the group stages. Now, Mo Salah obviously in it to win it. He hasn't yet. But let's have a look first at what his coach had to say ahead of the fixtures tomorrow.
Every footballer goes through ups and downs with the coaching staff at some point. Communication has always remained open with Mohamed Salah. When he joined the national team, I saw that he had great ambition. Mohamed Salah needs to win the Africa Cup of Nations. We will help him, and he will help us. We will work together, technical staff, players and supporters, to achieve this goal.
Now, his coach obviously won the AFCON 3 times,
Yes.
so he's got 3 AFCONs on Mo Salah. Do you think this is Mo Salah's time to shine?
Well, it might well be. I mean, it's a fascinating story because, like, first, Mo Salah is to say a superstar in Egypt doesn't go far enough. He is enormous. Ayman Yunus, a former defender for Egypt, said Egypt is known for 2 things around the world: the pyramids and Mo Salah. I mean, it's at that level, and it's true. It's amazing. He's a fantastic player. Maybe coming towards the end of his career, and of course, he's created a media storm recently by saying his club Liverpool have thrown him under the bus, and there's some debate about his club future. But in terms of Egypt, Hassan, in a previous interview, said he's not a legend because he's never won the Africa Cup of Nations. And then this caused a huge storm amongst his fans, saying, you know, as great a player as he was, Salah is up there with the all-time greats. So what will be going on in the mind of Mo Salah? Look, he's capable of winning any match on his own. Let's be clear about that. So if he is on form, if he is working well with his teammates, and if he has the support of the Egyptian Federation and his coach, Egypt can go all the way, and Salah can finally get his hands on that AFCON, which he's never done, and it's something, of course, he wants to do. This is a World Cup year as well. I think they should be too strong for Zimbabwe tomorrow. Zimbabwe don't have their best player, Marshall Maness. He's a fantastic midfield player, plays in England with Wolves. He's not fit enough for this tournament, so I think they'll be too strong tomorrow. And this is one of the big stories of this AFCON. Will Egypt go all the way, and will we see Salah holding that cup in the middle of January?
Yeah, and Thando, another question is this Mo Salah's last appearance at the AFCON?
I think possibly. It's a tough one to say, but I definitely think possibly, considering his current form at Liverpool, if he does make it out of Liverpool and then goes to a side where he's fielded a little bit more, respected a little bit more, and he performs a little bit better, then I think he can make another one. But I think with how things are going right now, maybe, I think this could be second from the last.
And what are some of the advantages or strong points on the Zimbabwe side? Do they have a chance maybe on the counter, or what are your opinions on that?
I think we spoke about this a little bit during the game when we're just trying to get a feel of what we can expect from tomorrow. And one player that stands out, I mean, it's unfortunate about Munetsi, who's not there, another player who played at Orlando Pirates. Okay, they're doing quite well in terms of producing a lot of players and for like international level. But I do think that without Munetsi, it's not all doom and gloom. I do think they have a little bit of experience. You have Knowledge Musona, who's quite experienced. He's 35 years old, but he's been playing for a long time. He played quite for a while at Kaizer Chiefs in South Africa, and he was one of the best players for a long time, for a considerable 3 seasons back to back. So I do think that he's someone to look out for in the middle field. And then there's also Sifuzire, who's joined the squad in June for qualifications, who joined Zimbabwe. And he's at Sheffield Wednesday as his fullback. So I do think that he can also deliver a little bit something for Zimbabwe. So I don't think it's all gloom for the Southern African side. It's just unfortunate, if you must, that they're facing a strong Egyptian side. And I think, it will be one to look out for. I think I don't want to say too much yet. I will make my remarks after the game about how we can see it going into the tournament for the rest of the duration.
Well, if we look at that Group B, though, I mean, Group of Death is a term that gets thrown around a bit. I think mainly for this AFCON, people are looking at Group F, but Group B is pretty rough as well. I mean, South Africa, Angola, Egypt, Zimbabwe. Who do we see ending up top, and who do we see flopping out in this group?
Yeah, well, you've got two World Cup teams in there. With the format, you can be third and go through. So the thing about Zimbabwe and South Africa, they know each other so well. So that might be the game that Zimbabwe, I don't really think, might have a chance of getting a point or 3, because a lot of their players have either played or have played in the South African League. And I saw a game between South Africa and Zimbabwe recently where it was just a deadlock. You know, Zimbabwe just knows South Africa so well. So, one win could get through. Zimbabwe could even get a point against against South Africa and then maybe win their other game. But I do think Egypt are the strongest in the group. Remember, every single AFCON held in North Africa has been won by a North African team this century. So there must be something in that. The conditions are going to help the North African teams.
And we've talked about some of those superstars in Group B. Are there any young players or people that you expect will come up and shine on this AFCON stage in particular that might have gone under the radar previously that you can think of?
Sibiya, the one I mentioned just now, he's quite young. I think he's 20 years old at Sheffield. And I think he embodies a new generation of Zimbabwean football, which is now a little bit more diverse, and there's a structure, there's a culture that's a little bit outside of the South African style of playing or the Southern African style of playing. But I like the point that you bring up about how it's always deadlocked between South Africa and Zimbabwe. And we find that in a lot of the COSAFA matchups, actually, because these are sides that play each other quite regularly. If not, they have a lot of players in their respective leagues. And so in terms of opposition, style of play, culture, even language, they understand each other. And so I think for South Africa, that's where they'll find their challenge in this edition of the African Cup of Nations. But I don't think it's all done for Bafana Bafana. We'll just see.
Keeping your fingers crossed for your team. Yeah. But what about Egypt? I mean, we talked about Mo Salah obviously taking up a lot of the headlines, but there's also quite a few young and relatively unknown players there. Do you think this is their platform where they could then hope to move on to further clubs afterwards?
Well, they've got Marmoush, who also plays in the English leagues with Manchester City, even though he hasn't had too many minutes so far. Look, Egypt have got a wonderful tradition in the African Cup of Nations. They were dominating in the noughties and early teens. They were the top team in Africa, and they just couldn't replicate that at the world stage. They have very rich clubs. They have a lot of the players come from the giants of Zamalek and Pyramids, one we were talking about. So it's a very strong unit. It's a very good physical side, and they're well managed. I mean, Egypt are always a really hard team to beat. One thing I would say, though, is I don't think we should read too much into the first match or two. It's a long tournament. It's 5 weeks. It's very hard to be good for 5 weeks. And we were talking about this earlier. Sometimes the teams that kind of go through under the radar are the ones that end up winning because there's a bit less media pressure on them, and their opponents maybe haven't quite worked out how good they are. So I'd be wary of teams that kind of start with 3-4 wins. They sometimes just fizzle out, and it's the other ones that go through. So even if the Egypt, for instance, get just a couple of draws and a win, I wouldn't rule them out going all the way.
It's a marathon, not a sprint,
exactly.
For sure. But how do you explain this break between like their heyday, which was where they had the back-to-back wins? Last time they won, I think, was in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. What's happened since then? Where have all the players gone?
Well, I watched a lot of AFCON in that period, and they were just grinding out these wins. They were just a brilliant unit, and they didn't have a Mo Salah back then, and it's ironic that now they do have this superstar. They haven't replicated that at the continental level. What was very disappointing was Salah wasn't quite fit for the 2018 World Cup, and I'm sure he really wants to make a big impact at the next World Cup in the USA, Canada, and Mexico. So he's going to be up for it. He's still pretty fit, for a guy in his mid-30s. So I think we'll see a lot more of Mohamed Salah this season, whether it's at Liverpool or another club.
Okay.
I think the problem could have been continuity. And not just the problem being an Egyptian problem. I think at the same time you had a lot of other countries who were pumping a lot more funds and a lot more energy into the development. And I just think that was like the equilibrium, and that saw them taking the back foot in this. So did you see sides like South Africa, Senegal, Mali, who have slightly better continuity, Morocco with like the best right now. So maybe that was their disadvantage, but maybe they can just fix it, repair it. Maybe they're back on the up and up. We'll see.
Well, that's all to play for. We'll be back for more tomorrow at 11 p.m. Paris time with a roundup of all the day's action of the African Cup of Nations. For now, though, I'd like to thank my expert panel, Thando, Sibiya and Andreas Evagora. Thank you very much, as well as all the France 24 teams behind the scenes. All your news continues right here on France 24.